The wind came down from the mountains before dawn, cold, mean. In the storage room behind the general store, a woman knelt beside her cot. Her hands moved to the loose floorboard. She lifted it. Beneath lay a wooden box. Inside waited $63, a silver locket, and a newspaper clipping. Woman sought in fraud investigation. Clara M. Haynes. Wanted for questioning in connection with $20,000. She had read those words so many times, the paper had gone soft. The town outside was still dark. Then boots scraped on the boardwalk. Then a rock crashed through the front window. Glass scattered across the floor. She did not flinch. She closed the box, stood, and walked out into the pre-dawn cold. She saddled the borrowed horse and rode north toward the ridge. The man who had posted the notice was waiting. The wind came down from the mountains before dawn, cold, mean. The kind that found the gaps in your coat and stayed there. Harlan's Crossing, Montana Territory. March 1882, a town of 400 souls, one church, 2 saloons, and more opinions than anyone needed. The kind of place where everybody knew your name before you told them, and decided who you were before you opened your mouth. Cole Dunbar was already awake. He was always already awake. 4 in the morning. The barn. A single lantern throwing orange light across the straw. He was working on Copper. Copper was 17 years old. A bay gelding with a bad left foreleg, 3 cracked hooves, and a disposition that had made 2 previous owners give up entirely. The first one sold him. The second one talked about shooting him. Cole had bought him for $11 from a man who couldn't look the horse in the eye when he named the price. That was 2 years ago. Now Cole lifted the bad leg slow, patient. His hands were enormous. The kind of hands that could split firewood with one swing, or crush a man's shoulder without trying. But right now they moved careful, feeling for the tender spot, not pushing. Just listening through his palms, the horse trembled once, stopped, stood still. Cole set the hoof down gentle, straightened up to his full 6'5", and looked at the animal for a moment. Nobody watching, nobody to impress. Just a man and a horse, and the quiet that comes before the rest of the world remembers to exist. That was how Cole Dunbar operated. He didn't need an audience, he never had. He'd built Dunbar Ridge the same way. 500 acres at 16, when fever took both parents in 2 weeks and left him with land, a mortgage, and no instruction manual for either. He hadn't gone to neighbors asking for help. Hadn't attended church socials hoping someone would take pity. He'd done the work. Sunrise to dark, 7 days, year after year, until the mortgage was gone, and the 500 acres had become 1,000, then 2, then 3, 10 years. 3,000 acres of grassland, timber, and water rights, a cattle contract with the territory, and a house he'd built himself from timber. He'd cut himself on a ridge above a valley that looked, on certain mornings, like something God had set aside for a specific purpose, and hadn't gotten around to explaining yet. Everything a man could want, except someone to come home to. He put that thought away the same way he put away everything that couldn't be fixed by work. Efficiently, without ceremony. He picked up Copper's foreleg again, checked the fit of the shoe he'd reset the previous evening, and decided it would hold another week. Then, he set about the morning feeding, 3 miles south, in the storage room behind Harlan's Crossing General Store. Clara Haynes had her hands in dough. 4:14 in the morning. She knew the time without looking, because she always knew the time. Her body had learned it the hard way, 6 towns ago, when sleeping past 5 meant missing the bread order, which meant losing the job, which meant losing the room, which meant packing the box and moving again. She wasn't going to move again. She was. The dough pushed back against her palms. She pushed harder. There was something satisfying about that. Something that required exactly the force she put in and gave back exactly what she earned. The storage room was small, a cot against one wall, a wash basin, a hook for her coat, a window the size of a Bible that faced the alley and showed her a rectangle of dark sky and nothing else, and under the floorboard beneath the cot, a wooden box. She didn't look at it. She never looked at it in the morning. Morning was for working. Morning was for flour on her hands, and heat from the stove, and the particular silence of a town that hadn't started judging her yet. The box could wait. The box always waited. Inside it, $63 in paper and coin. A silver locket she couldn't sell because it was the last thing left from before everything fell apart. A deed to a piece of land in another state she'd never visited and probably never would. And a newspaper clipping, folded small. Creased so many times the paper had gone soft at the edges. She didn't need to open it. She had every word memorized. Woman sought in fraud investigation. Clara M. Haynes, former clerk at Verity Savings Bank, Caldwell Flats, Kansas. Wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance of funds totaling $20,000. $20,000. She'd made $3 a week at that job. $3. She pressed both fists into the dough and held them there. Breathe, the ovens needed stoking. The bread needed shaping. Mr. Tillman opened the store at 7 and expected his Parker House rolls ready by 6:30. And Clara Haynes was not going to be the reason anything was late. Not today. Not any day. The notice appeared on a Thursday. Pinned to the board, outside the land office, between a flyer for a missing mule and an advertisement for patent medicine that promised to cure everything from gout to moral weakness. Cole Dunbar had written it himself. No help, no decoration. Just a piece of good paper and a steady hand, and a decision he'd been working up to for 2 months. Not us. Man of property seeks wife. Bust be strong. Honest. Willing to work. No weakness for drink, no fondness for gossip, no fragile temperament. Life will be hard, but it will be fair. Offered in return, security, respect, and equal share in all holdings. Serious inquiries only. C. Dunbar, Dunbar Ridge. North boundary by 8 in the morning. Ada Colton had read it. By 8:15, she had told 4 people. By 9 o'clock, the entire town was laughing. Ada Colton was the kind of woman who had decided she was the moral authority of Harlan's Crossing, and nobody had thought to disagree loudly enough to change her mind. She was 53 years old. She had a sharp nose, sharper opinions, and a voice that carried 3 storefronts in any direction without effort. She found Clara at the store counter at 9:15. She wasn't alone. She brought Mabel Foss and Ruth Stanhope with her, which was how Ada always operated. Witnesses, an audience. Someone to confirm later that she had said exactly what needed saying. Have you seen this? Ada slapped the notice flat on the counter. Clara looked up from the register, looked down at the paper. Read it without picking it up. I've seen it, she said. Can you imagine? Ada's voice was not a question, like ordering a plow from a catalog. The man is a savage, 6.5 feet tall, built like a barn. Killed a man once with his bare hands. That was ruled self-defense, Clara said. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled toward her. How do you know that? Mabel Foss said. I heard Sheriff Greer mention it. Well, Ada picked up the notice with 2 fingers, like it might be contagious. Lawful or not, the man is an animal. Lives up on that ridge like a hermit. Doesn't drink. Doesn't attend services. Doesn't speak to anyone unless spoken to, and even then barely. Sounds like he minds his own business, Clara said. The silence that followed was the kind Clara had learned to recognize. The kind that meant she had said something that would be repeated, reshaped, and used against her later. She picked up a cloth and wiped down the counter. What decent woman would answer a thing like that? Ruth Stanhope said. Nobody answered. Clara kept wiping. After they left, in a flutter of whispers and sideways looks, she was alone behind the counter for a full minute before she picked up the notice they'd left behind. She read it again, slower this time. Must be strong, honest, willing to work. She'd been all 3 her whole adult life, and it had gotten her a storage room and $63 in a newspaper clipping. She couldn't stop carrying, offered in return. Security, respect, and equal share in all holdings. Respect. She put the notice down, picked it back up. Respect. When was the last time anyone had offered her that? She couldn't remember. She genuinely could not remember. Cole came to town that same afternoon. He came 4 times a year. Spring for seed and supplies, summer for fence materials, fall after the cattle contracts were settled, winter for whatever the ranch had run short of. He never stayed longer than 2 hours. He didn't drink at the saloons, didn't play cards, didn't stop to talk unless someone spoke to him directly and required an answer. He had learned, over 10 years, that his size made people nervous and his silence made it worse, and there was nothing he could do about either one that wouldn't make it more awkward than just leaving quickly. So he left quickly. He bought what he needed from Tillman's store, paid without haggling, and was heading back to his horse when old George Ferris's roan mare got her left shoe caught in the gap between the hitching post and the boardwalk. The mare was panicking, pulling back, eyes white and rolling. 2 men stood nearby watching, neither of them moving. Ferris himself was 80 years old and couldn't bend his knees enough to help. Cole stopped. Nobody asked him to. He handed his parcels to the nearest bystander without a word, walked to the mare, and crouched down slow. He put one hand flat on her shoulder first, just resting there. No pressure, just presence. The mare shook once, twice stopped. He worked the shoe free in under a minute, stood. The mare stepped back, breathing hard, then settled. He collected his parcels. Clara was watching from the store doorway. She hadn't meant to be watching. She'd come to the door to see about the commotion. And then she'd stayed because she couldn't look away. Not because of the size of him, though he was enormous, a full head taller than the men around him. Shoulders that blocked the light. Because of the hands, the way they'd moved on that horse's shoulder. Patient and flat and completely sure of themselves, not rough. Not performing gentleness for an audience. Just actually gentle, like it cost him nothing. Like it was simply she went back inside. She went back to the counter. She told herself she was not thinking about it. She thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. That night, Clara sat on the edge of her cot and did not open the wooden box. She thought about 7 towns in 3 years. She thought about waking up every morning, in rooms that were never hers, and working for people who were always one more mood away from not needing her anymore. She thought about the winter in Billings, where the temperature dropped to 30 below, and she couldn't afford coal. And she burned the legs of a broken chair in the stove and told herself this was temporary. She'd been telling herself that for 3 years. This is temporary. I just need a little more time. It'll be different in the next town. Except it never was different. It was always the same. New faces, same script. New room, same box under the floor. New job, same $3 a week, and the constant low hum of knowing that someone, somewhere, might be asking questions about a woman who used to work at Verity Savings Bank in Caldwell Flats, Kansas. She pulled the notice from her apron pocket. She'd kept it, she hadn't planned to. It had just stayed there through the rest of the day, through the dinner rush, through closing, through the long walk back to the storage room. She read it again in the lamplight. Equal, share in all holdings. She didn't know anything about this man. A few rumors. A reputation built on size and silence. A story about a dead man that everyone told one way, and the sheriff told another. He could be exactly what people said. Dangerous. Cold. A hermit who'd put an ad in a paper out of desperation and had no idea what he was actually asking for. Or she folded the notice very carefully and set it on top of the box. Or he could be the man she'd watched crouch beside a panicking horse and use his hands like a promise. She lay back on the cot. The wind pressed against the window. She stared at the ceiling and told herself she was going to sleep. She did not sleep. At some point between midnight and 2 in the morning, she sat up, took out a piece of paper, and began to write. She left before sunrise. She told Mr. Tillman she needed a day for personal business. She'd made the rolls in advance, left them covered on the counter, written down the baking times for the bread. Tillman looked at her with the particular expression of a man who didn't approve of women having personal business, but was smart enough to know his morning sales depended on her Parker House rolls. "Back by tomorrow," she said. "Not a question, be back by tomorrow," he replied. Also not a question. She borrowed a horse from the livery. The directions she'd found in the land office record were simple enough. North road to the fork, west trail to the boundary markers. Follow the creek until the valley opened up. 4 hours. She'd never ridden 4 hours alone before. She rode anyway. The land changed as she went north. The dry scrub at the edge of town gave way to pine. The air got colder and cleaner. The trail climbed, dipped, and climbed again. She passed a creek running high with snowmelt. She passed a stand of timber so thick the morning light barely reached the ground. She told herself she was making a practical decision. This was practical. This was the most practical thing she had done in 3 years. She was a woman alone with $63 and a fugitive warrant with her name on it. She needed somewhere the questions wouldn't reach. Somewhere off a main road. Somewhere a person could work hard and be paid fairly and not have to pack a bag every 6 months. Because somebody's cousin in somebody's other town had started asking around. Practical, not desperate. Absolutely not desperate. She crested a ridge, and the valley appeared below her, like something out of a painting she'd once seen in a hotel lobby in Denver. The kind of painting that makes you stop and stare, because the colors are too right to be real. Grassland, timber, a creek she could hear from up here, mountains at the back, still white at the peak, and in the middle of it all, a ranch, not a rough homestead, not a shack with a lean-to and ambition, a real working ranch. Corals, outbuildings, a barn that could house 20 horses. The main house was solid timber, 2 stories, stone chimney. A porch that ran the full width of the front. Smoke rising straight up in the cold morning air. Someone was home. Of course someone was home. She tightened her grip on the reins. "What are you doing?" she was asking herself. Very sincerely. "You don't know this man. You don't know anything about him except rumors in one moment, with a horse and a notice that said the word respect. You rode 4 hours on a borrowed horse to knock on the door of a stranger who put an ad in a paper because he wants a wife. In 2 days. You have been reading too many things into too little evidence. And you should turn this horse around right now. And go back to the storage room and the $63 and the perfectly manageable life you have built." She looked at the valley. She looked at the smoke rising straight from the chimney. She thought about the storage room. She rode down into the valley. He was in the corral when she arrived, working with a young horse. A gray that was skittish and not entirely happy about whatever lesson was being attempted. Cole was standing in the center of the corral, not chasing the horse, not forcing anything. Just standing there in the animal's space, patient as stone, waiting. He heard the hoofbeats. He didn't look up immediately. He finished the moment, whatever he was communicating to the gray, and only then turned. He saw her. She saw him see her. He was bigger than he'd seemed in town, which she hadn't thought was possible, but it wasn't his size. Exactly, it was the stillness. The complete absence of the nervous energy most men had when something unexpected happened. He just looked at her, took her in, processing without performing. She realized she had stopped breathing. Somewhere in the last 30 seconds, she breathed. "Miss Haynes," he said. "Not a question, Mr. Dunbar." Her voice came out steadier than she deserved credit for. "I came about your notice." He looked at her for a long moment. The gray horse moved in the background. A crow called from somewhere in the pines. "You read it," he said. "Yes. Understand what it says?" I think so. Think so." He moved to the corral fence, rested his arms on the top rail, not threatening. Just occupying space the way very large people had to when they wanted to seem less overwhelming, which was an art he'd clearly had to practice. "Let me be plain then. I'm not looking for a housekeeper. Not looking for someone to pour tea or look pretty at the church social. I need a partner. Someone who works. Someone who doesn't break when things get hard. Someone who says what they mean and means what they say. That's what I'm offering in return." Partnership. Not a fairy tale story. Not a story. A working arrangement between two people who keep their word. She looked at him. He looked at her. I'm not looking for a fairy tale, Clara said. I'm looking for a place to stop running. Something shifted in his expression. Very small. Easy to miss. But she was watching closely. Running from what? He asked. Does it matter? Might. The law? No. She met his eyes. A person. Someone who decided I was easier to destroy than to be honest with. I've been moving ever since. 7 towns in 3 years. He was quiet for a moment, studying her in the same way he'd studied the gray horse. Not judging. Taking measure. People in town say things about me, he said. Say I'm dangerous. Say I killed a man. I know. Doesn't put you off? She thought about it honestly. You posted a notice instead of taking what you wanted. That tells me something. He was quiet again, then. Come inside. I'll make coffee. The house was cleaner than she'd expected. Not decorated. There were no curtains, no flowers, no evidence of a woman's touch anywhere. But clean, ordered. Everything had a place, and was in it. The kitchen had a good cast-iron stove, a solid table, 4 chairs. A shelf on the wall held a small row of books, not for show. The spines were worn, the doorways were tall, the furniture was built heavy. Everything in the room had been scaled or chosen for a man who was too large for ordinary things. And he moved through the space, with the learned caution of someone who'd spent years remembering, that he could break what he didn't mean to. He poured coffee without asking how she took it. She drank it black anyway. They sat across from each other. Why'd you post the notice? Clara asked. Because I was tired of being alone. No hesitation. No shame in it. I built this place over 10 years. Everything a person could want. 3,000 acres, good water, timber rights, a cattle contract with the territory. I tried the other way first. Talking to women at church socials. Attending dances in town. Didn't work, why not? He looked at himself. The gesture was so brief she almost missed it. Just a quick glance down at his own hands. I make people nervous, always have. Too big, too quiet. Women look at me and see something that might hurt them. Have you ever hurt anyone who didn't try to hurt you first? No. Then they're fools, he almost smiled. Almost, maybe, he said. But I got tired of trying to convince them otherwise. Figured if I was going to be alone regardless, I might as well be alone on my own terms. But then he stopped, drank his coffee. I woke up one morning and realized I'd built something worth having, and there was no one to share it with. No one who'd remember I was here after I was gone. The honesty of it settled over the room like weather. I'm not looking for romance, he said. I want to be clear about that. I want a partner. Someone to work beside. Someone to sit on the porch with at the end of the day. Someone who'll remember me. I'll tell you something I haven't told anyone, Clara said. He waited. I have a reason for running that I haven't mentioned. Something I'll need to tell you before we make any decisions. Because if I don't tell you and you find out another way, that's the kind of thing that breaks trust. And trust is the one thing this arrangement requires. He looked at her steadily. Then tell me. After you show me the property, she said, I want to see what I'd be agreeing to. Then I'll tell you everything. It wasn't a negotiation exactly. It was a test. She was watching to see if he'd push, if he'd insist on information first before giving anything. He stood up. I'll saddle horses. They rode for nearly 2 hours. He showed her the north boundary, marked with posts he'd set himself. The creek that ran year-round regardless of drought. The timber stands he harvested selectively, taking what was needed, leaving the rest. The south pasture where the cattle were grazing, fat and calm. He didn't talk constantly. That was something she noted. Most men, when they wanted to impress someone, talked constantly, filled the silence with inventory. Look at this, look at that. Here's what I have. Here's what I'm worth. Cole pointed at things when they were relevant, explained what needed explaining, and then let the land speak for itself. It spoke well. They stopped on a ridge above the valley as the afternoon light went gold. It's beautiful, Clara said. It's hard, he said. Winters here are severe. We can be snowed in for weeks, cattle die, equipment fails. A person can go days without seeing another soul except, he paused, except whoever's here. You think that would bother me? He looked at her, really looked, the direct kind. The kind most people couldn't hold for more than a second. I think you've been making yourself smaller for a long time. Quieter than you are. Less than you are. This land doesn't want that. It wants everything you've got. Something cracked open in her chest. She looked at the valley below, then she told him. All of it. She told it plainly. The way you told things you'd carried so long they'd lost their power to make you flinch. Victor Marsh. Verity Savings Bank in Caldwell Flats, Kansas. The dinners at his house that she'd thought were professional courtesy until they weren't. The locked office door. The offer she'd refused. 3 days later, the investigation. He created false accounts, she said. Moved money in small amounts over 2 years. Used my clerk code on every transaction. When I tried to report what I'd seen, he was already at the president's office with a stack of documents showing it was me. Cole hadn't spoken in several minutes. And you ran, he said finally. I ran. I had no money for lawyers, no family, no one who knew me well enough to vouch for me. She kept her eyes on the valley. Staying meant prison for something I didn't do. Is the warrant still active? Yes, he was quiet. A long quiet. The wind moved through the pines below them. The notice said equal share in all holdings, Clara said. If what you meant was a legal partnership. Marriage, shared property, split work. I need you to know what you're taking king on when you take on me. Why are you telling me, he asked. You could have hidden it. Seen what the arrangement looked like first. Because if I can't be honest, at the start is already rotten. She turned to face him. And I'm done building on rotten ground. He looked at her for a long time. The sun moved. There's something else you should know, he said. She waited. I asked about you in town. Before you came in about the notice, I'd already noticed you. Twice. You were the only person in Harlan's Crossing who looked at me like I was a regular man. He didn't seem embarrassed by the admission, just factual. I know you work hard. I know you show up every day and don't complain. I know you shut down gossip instead of spreading it. That's the most I've ever known about anyone before making a decision this size. It's not enough. But it's a start. Clara was quiet. What do you need from me? He asked. To make this decision, I need to know you won't use what I told you against me. I won't. I need to know you meant what you wrote. The equal share. I'll have papers drawn up at the land office. Everything in writing before the judge. And I need to know. She stopped. What? That if it gets complicated. If my past catches up with us. You won't look at me the way you just described people looking at you. He was quiet for a moment. I posted that notice, knowing I had nothing to offer but work, honesty, and a hard life, he said. If I held your past against you, I'd be exactly the kind of person I've spent 10 years proving I'm not. She took a breath. I'll have an answer in 3 days, she said. I'll be here. The ride back to Harlan's Crossing took longer than it should have. She let the horse walk. Her mind was running faster than she wanted it to. 3,000 acres. A valley that looked like a painting. A man who'd said equal and meant it. Who'd said respect and written it on paper in public for the whole town to see. Who'd listened to the worst thing about her and asked not a single question. That suggested he was already deciding she was guilty. She thought about Victor Marsh. She thought about someone named Nora Vass. Whoever she was, whatever, young woman, was sitting at a desk at Verity Savings Bank right now. New on the job. Being shown how things worked. Being told she'd been noticed. Being invited to dinner at the supervisor's house. The thought sat in her chest like a coal. She pushed it away. Not yet. She couldn't think about that yet. The sun was setting when Harlan's Crossing appeared. The livery was still lit. Clara returned the horse, paid the extra day, and walked back toward the store. Ada Colton was waiting on the steps. Of course she was. Well, Ada's arms were crossed. Her expression was the particular kind of excited that dressed itself up as concerned. Jenny at the livery saw you take a horse north. You went to see him, didn't you? Clara reached past her for the door key. "Good evening." "Mrs. Colton, don't you good evening me. Do you know what people will say? This is a small town." "Reputation is." Clara turned, and something in her face made Ada Colton take a step back. "I have been in 7 towns in 3 years," Clara said. Her voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't need volume. "I have worked every job available to a woman alone. I have kept my head down, caused no trouble, broken no laws." She paused. "And in every single town, people like you decided who I was before I opened my mouth." "Silence? So no," Clara said. "I don't care what people say. Not anymore." She went inside. She locked the door behind her. She sat down on the edge of the cot. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the effort of having meant every word of that and knowing she couldn't take it back. She didn't want to take it back. She pulled out the notice. "Be strong, honest, willing to work." She looked at it for a long time. Then she pulled out a fresh piece of paper and wrote 3 lines. The next morning, she found a rock through the front window of the store. Tillman arrived at opening time, glass on the floor. Clara was already sweeping. "What happened?" He looked at the window, looked at her. Something complicated moved across his face. "This is about Dunbar. The man from the ridge." "Yes," she said. "Clara, I like you. I do. You're the best thing that's happened to my morning sales in years. But I've got a family. I've got a reputation in this town. If folks start thinking I'm employing someone who what?" She set down the broom. Her voice was level. "Who visited a man who posted a public notice. In broad daylight. On a borrowed horse. With every intention of returning by the following morning. It's not proper. The broken window isn't proper." He looked at the window. He looked at her. He was not a cruel man. She had known that from the first week. He was simply a man more afraid of his neighbors than of being wrong. "I'm giving you a week's pay," he said finally, "and a good reference. But I need you to. I'll be gone by tonight," she said. She went to the storage room. She packed in 40 minutes. Box, clothes, the small collection of things she owned that could fit in one bag without straining. She stood in the empty storage room. The indentation, the thin mattress where she'd slept for 8 months. The rectangle of light from the window the size of a Bible. She felt nothing. No, that was wrong. She felt relief, clean and complete and slightly terrifying. Like the moment you realize you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what breathing normally felt like. She walked to the telegraph office. She wrote the message on the form carefully. "See Dunbar Ridge. Stop." Answer is yes. Stop. "See Haynes." She handed it across the counter. The operator read it without expression. That was a professional skill she respected. She went to the boarding house on 2nd Street and paid for one night. 3 hours later, a boy knocked on her door with a folded teleform. She opened it. "Come tomorrow." Stop. Bring everything. Stop. See Dunbar. She sat down on the boarding house bed. Outside, Harlan's Crossing was going about its afternoon business. Someone was hammering something somewhere. A dog was barking at something across the street. The ordinary, indifferent noise of a place that had already decided what it thought of her, and was comfortable with that decision. She looked at the telegraph. Bring everything. He'd assumed she'd have things worth bringing. That detail. That small, thoughtless, entirely practical detail. It did something to her chest she wasn't prepared for. She put the telegraph carefully in the box, next to the newspaper clipping, next to the $63, next to the silver locket. Then she lay back on the bed and, for the first time in 3 years, fell asleep before dark. He was waiting at the boundary line when she arrived the next morning. He'd brought a pack horse for her things. She stopped when she saw it, the extra horse, already saddled and ready, hitched to the fence post. Not a question, not a gesture. Just a practical man who had thought about what she would need and arranged for it before she arrived. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Wasn't sure." They rode into the valley side by side. The morning light was the kind that made everything look like it might actually be worth something. Gold in the grass. Long shadows from the pines. the creek running loud somewhere below them. "What happened in town?" he asked. "Got fired." A pause. "Because of me? Because of small minds and a broken window." He glanced over. "I'm sorry, don't be." She looked at the valley coming toward them, at the ranch getting bigger as they rode. "I'm not." They reached Dunbar Ridge as the sun cleared the eastern ridge and fell full on the house. He helped her down from the horse. His hands were careful. The size of them was still something her nervous system hadn't entirely made peace with. But the carefulness never changed. "Guest room for now," he said. "You pick the left or right side of the hall. I'll have papers ready at the land office tomorrow morning." Then the judge. Tomorrow? She hadn't expected tomorrow. The sooner it's in writing, the more protected you are. He took her bag from the packer horse. "Unless you've changed your mind, I haven't changed my mind," he nodded. Carried her bag to the door, held it open. She stepped into the house that was not yet hers, and looked at the kitchen and the shelf of worn books, and the cast-iron stove and the table big enough for two people to sit across from each other and have a real conversation. She thought about the storage room. She thought about the note that said, "Bring everything." She took a breath and stayed. That night, they sat on the porch until the cold drove them in. Cole talked about the ranch, the work cycles, the seasons, what she'd need to know. She listened and asked questions, and he answered without condescension. Just two people in the dark, building a shared language for a shared life. "People in town are going to say things," Cole said at some point. "About you. About this. Let them. It won't be kind. I don't need kind." She pulled her coat closer. "I need honest." He looked at her then. Something shifting in his expression that she couldn't fully read in the dark. Something that might have been recognition. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" A long pause, someone running hard enough that they'd agree to anything just to stop. "I'm still running," she said. "I just stopped pretending it's going anywhere good on my own, and now?" She looked at the valley below them, at the dark shapes of the mountains beyond. "Now I'm running towards something instead." He didn't say anything to that. But he didn't have to. Some things you recognize without naming them. She went inside. She lay in the guest room. Clean sheets, good bed, a window looking over the valley, and listened to the house settle around her. Under the floorboard she'd chosen almost without thinking, she'd placed the box. She didn't open it, didn't need to. Whatever was behind her could stay there. Tomorrow they'd go to town. Tomorrow they'd sign papers and stand before a judge. Tomorrow whatever came next would begin. Tonight she was just still. And still, she realized, was something she hadn't been in a very long time. The wind moved through the pines outside the window. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once and went quiet. Clara Haynes closed her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself sleep without listening for footsteps. The land office smelled like old paper and cold ambition. Cole had been there before, many times, buying parcels, filing water rights, recording boundaries he'd fought for and earned. The clerk knew him by name and by the particular way he had to duck through the doorway. This time was different. This time he had a woman beside him, and the whole town knew it. The waiting room was full. Not with people who had land business, with people who had heard, who had risen early and found reasons to be in that particular building at that particular hour. There was something almost impressive about the efficiency of small-town gossip. How it could mobilize a crowd before breakfast. Clara walked in like she didn't notice she noticed. Cole could see it in the set of her jaw, that small tightening. The deliberate stillness of a person who had learned that showing anything was an invitation. He'd learned the same thing, different reason. Same lesson. Thomas Greeley, the land clerk, peered at them over his spectacles. "Mr. Dunbar." A pause. "Miss Haynes." "Mrs. Dunbar," Cole said. After today, the room behind them went very quiet. Greeley looked at the papers Cole had drafted. Read them twice. His eyebrows climbed slowly toward his hairline. "Equal ownership of all properties and holdings. That's not. Mr. Dunbar, most men retain." "I'm not most men." Cole leaned forward. "Just slightly. Just enough." Greeley's chair creaked as he pressed back. "Are the documents legal?" Cole asked. "They're legal." "Then file them." Greeley filed them. The scratch of pen on paper was the only sound in the room. When it was done, Greeley rotated the ledger. "Sign here, both of you." Cole signed first. Clara watched his handwriting. Careful, precise, surprisingly elegant for hands that size. Then he offered her the pen. She took it, held it over the page, and for 1/2 second, everything stopped. This was real. This was ink and paper and witness. This was the kind of thing that could not be undone by packing a bag in 40 minutes and riding north, which was what she'd been able to do for 3 years. Which was, if she was honest, truly honest, the thing she had been doing instead of living. Her hand moved. "Clara M. Haynes, witnessed and recorded," Greeley said. "You'll need Judge Elton for the marriage itself." Courthouse, second door, on the left. They stepped outside into cold morning sun. The crowd followed, not close enough to be rude. "Close enough to watch 30 people," Clara said quietly, not looking back, at least. Cole walked beside her. "They'll watch for weeks, waiting for one of us to break, and if we don't, then they'll find something else to talk about. Eventually." Judge Elton was a compact man in his late 60s. Sharp eyes, ink-stained fingers, the kind of face that had heard every story and stopped being surprised by any of them. He looked up when they came in, took them both in, with one slow assessment. Cole Dunbar, not a greeting exactly, more like a fact being confirmed. "Heard you were looking for a wife." Didn't quite believe it, heard right. The judge's gaze moved to Clara. "And you are Clara Haynes, the baker from Tillman's." He gestured to chairs. "Sit." Cole sat. The chair was too small. It was always too small. "You understand what you're doing?" Elton addressed Clara directly, which she noticed. Most men in rooms like this talk to the other man. Marriage is a legal contract. Not something to enter into after 2 days, I understand, do you? He leaned back. "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks rushed. I've been cautious for 3 years, Clara said. "I'm trying something different." Something moved in Elton's expression. "Approval, maybe. Or recognition." He turned to Cole. "You explained the realities? The isolation? The winters?" "I did. And you intend to honor the terms you filed this morning? Equal ownership, full stop?" "I filed them." Cole's voice had an edge, quiet edge. "But there, I honor what I file." Elton studied them for a long moment. Then he pulled out a leather-bound book and opened it. "Join hands." Clara's hand disappeared into Cole's. His palm was calloused and warm and completely steady. Elton read quickly. No flourish, no poetry, just the legal architecture of what they were agreeing to, Cole Dunbar. "Do you take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do, Clara Haynes." "Do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" The room was small and quiet, and her mouth was dry, and she thought about Victor Marsh's office, and the storage room, and $63.07, and a newspaper clipping she'd carried so long it had worn soft at the folds. She thought about a man crouching beside a panicking horse and using his hands like a promise. "I do. Then by the authority vested in me by Montana Territory, I pronounce you married." Elton closed the book. "Advice, if you'll take it. People are going to test you both. Don't give them anything to work with." "Wasn't planning to," Cole said. Elton stood. Offered his hand to Clara. "Welcome to the territory, Mrs. Dunbar." The name landed like something physical. Mrs. Dunbar. Not Haynes. Not the woman from the fraud investigation in Caldwell Flats. Not the baker who slept in the storage room and moved every 6 months when the questions started. Someone new. Or maybe someone she'd always been, finally with the right name for it. Outside, the crowd had grown. 40 people now. Easy Ada Colton stood front and center, arms crossed. Mouth already moving. "Well," Ada called. "Isn't this romantic? 2 whole days of courtship. That's practically a lifetime." Cole walked without stopping. Clara matched his. "Did you tell him?" Ada's voice sharpened, louder now, for the audience. "About why you keep moving, Clara? About the town before this one? And the one before that? Because I have a cousin, Ada, out in Kansas. And she writes letters, very detailed letters. About a woman who worked at a bank in Caldwell Watts Flats and disappeared when the money did. The world didn't tilt exactly. It shifted, just slightly. The way a floor shifts when there's something wrong with the foundation, and you've been pretending not to feel it. Clara kept walking. You might want to ask your new wife some questions, Mr. Dunbar. Ada's voice followed them down the street. Before you find out the hard way what you married. They reached the horses. Clara's hands were not steady on the reins. Cole mounted. Didn't look at her yet. They rode out of Harlan's Crossing at a trot that became a canter. The town fell away behind them. The road went north. The pines came back. The air got cleaner. They didn't speak until the valley appeared. Cole slowed his horse. Clara slowed hers. Is it true, he said. Not a question exactly. More like a door he was opening and leaving open. Part of it. She kept her eyes forward. It's more complicated than she made it sound. Tell me the part that isn't complicated. There's no part that isn't complicated. She pulled her horse to a stop. Her hands were still not entirely steady. There was trouble in Kansas. With money. With a man who had more power than me and used it. What kind of trouble? The kind where someone decides you're more useful as a scapegoat than as a person. She looked at him then. Finally, I told you I was running from someone. I told you it wasn't the law. That was true. What I didn't tell you was the amount. Cole said nothing. $20,000, she said. That's what they say I took. That's the number on the warrant. The silence after that was heavy in a way the earlier silences hadn't been. Did you take it? No. Can you prove it? No. He destroyed the evidence. My word against his. And his word came with a title and a father-in-law on the board of directors. Cole looked at the valley below them, the ranch. The smoke from the chimney. You lied to me, he said. I didn't lie. I left things out. There's a difference? Yes. She didn't flinch from it. I left things out because I needed to know if you were the kind of person I could trust before I handed you the thing that could destroy me. That's not a lie. That's survival. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she started to calculate. Distance to the nearest town. How much of the $63 was left? Whether the judge would annul the papers before the ink was dry. Come on, Cole said finally. He rode toward the ranch. She followed. Neither of them said anything else. Inside, Cole built up the fire. Clara stood in the kitchen and didn't know what to do with her hands, which was new. Her hands always knew what to do. They'd been knowing what to do since she was 14 years old. And first learned that useful hands meant you kept your room and your meals and your place in whatever arrangement you were, depending on. Right now they just hung there. I need to know one thing, Cole said. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the fire catch, and I need it to be true. All right, did you steal that money? No. Would you steal from me? Never. He faced her. How do I know that? You don't? She met his eyes. You have to decide whether to trust me. Same way I had to decide whether to trust you when I rode up to a stranger's ranch on a borrowed horse because a piece of paper said the word respect. Something moved through his expression. That's not the same thing, isn't it? She took a step closer. Not aggressive, just refusing to retreat. You spent 10 years being judged for how you look. Having people decide you're dangerous before you opened your mouth. Having your whole character reduced to a rumor about a man who drew first. She stopped. Tell me how that's different. He turned away. Braced both hands on the mantel. His shoulders were a wall. I should have told you before the judge, Clara said quietly. That was wrong. I'm sorry for that. Genuinely, sorry doesn't fix it. No. But it's what I have. The fire popped. The wind outside pressed against the house. I've been alone on this land for 10 years, Cole said, not turning around. I know every fence post, every creek bend, every place where the ground goes soft in the thaw. I built it all myself and I know all of it. A pause. And I just signed half of it to a woman I've known for 4 days, who has a federal warrant with her name on it. I know. That's not a small thing, Clara, I know. She didn't look away. I know it's not small. And I know I'm asking you to take something on that you didn't agree to when you posted that notice. What are you asking me, exactly? She thought about it. To not make up your mind yet, she said. Give it time. Let me show you who I actually am. And then decide. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, there's stew on the stove. You should eat, and that was that. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. But not the end. The first week was careful. They worked side by side and said little and felt everything. Cole showed her the cattle operation. How to read animal behavior. How to spot illness before it became crisis. How to handle the rope without burning her palms raw. He demonstrated once. Didn't repeat himself unless she asked. When she got something wrong, he showed her again. No commentary. She noticed he never raised his voice. Not at the horses. Not at the cattle. Not at her. Not even when the fence section in the north pasture collapsed after a night of ice, and they spent 4 hours in freezing wind resetting posts. His face was red and his hands were chapped and the work was miserable. He didn't say one word that wasn't useful. She found that strange at first. Men in her experience had a particular relationship with difficulty. They narrated it. They wanted acknowledgement for enduring it. Look how hard this is. Look how much I'm doing. Cole just did the work. She found herself doing the same. Somewhere in the middle of the third week, she realized she was sleeping better than she had in 3 years. Not completely, not without the dreams, but better. The particular vigilance she carried, the low-level alertness of someone who had trained themselves to be ready to move at any hour, was loosening, slightly, degree by degree, the way a fist opens when it finally decides to. She didn't entirely trust it, but she noticed. The first time they had a real conversation, not logistics, not ranch work, just two people talking, was the 19th night. She knew it was the 19th because she'd been counting without meaning to. Counting the mornings she woke up, and he'd already made coffee. Counting the evenings they sat by the fire in silence that was getting less careful and more comfortable. Counting the moments she thought about saying something real and didn't, and then lay awake afterward, cataloging what she hadn't said. 19th night. Fire burning low. Cole reading from the agricultural journal he'd had for 2 years. Clara mending a tear in her riding skirt. Can I ask you something? She said. He looked up. Go ahead. Why did you really post the notice? The full reason. He closed the journal. Looked at the fire. My parents died when I was 16, he said. Fever took them both in 2 weeks. I inherited 500 acres and a mortgage. Spent the next 10 years, paying it off and building up. He paused. I didn't have time for anything else. Didn't go to dances. Didn't court anyone. When the land was finally clear and the cattle contracts were, I woke up one morning and realized I was 32 years old and completely alone. And you wanted company, Clara said. I wanted someone to build with. He looked at her. Direct. Not someone to take care of. Someone to build with. There's a difference. She understood the difference. She had never been offered it before. You could have just come to town more often, she said. Tried the regular way again. He almost smiled. That barely there version she'd learned to watch for. 3 women ran from me. 2 of them mid-conversation. One of them actually tripped over a porch step trying to leave. The step or you? Combination. She laughed. Actually laughed. The real kind. The kind that surprised her coming out. He watched her laugh with an expression that was hard to interpret, not quite smiling. But something close to it. Something warmer than close. It's not funny, he said. It's a little funny. It's not. But the corner of his mouth moved. She was very committed to leaving. And so you posted a notice. And so I posted a notice. He picked up the journal. Again. Put it back down. Figured if I was clear about what I wanted, at least, no one could say they didn't know what they were getting into. Did it work? A long pause. Jury's still out, he said. She looked at him. He looked back, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Dunbar Ridge, she felt something that wasn't caution or calculation, or the particular low-grade anxiety of waiting for things to go wrong. She wasn't sure what to call it yet, but she felt it. Week 5, Clara was in the barn, cleaning tack, When Cole came back from town with a look on his face she hadn't seen before. Not angry, not cold, careful. The kind of careful that meant something bad was being held in with deliberate effort. He handed her a folded piece of paper. She read it, then read it again, then read it once more, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something different on the third pass. Notice of inquiry. Clara M. Haynes, formerly of Caldwell Flats, Kansas. Wanted for questioning in connection with embezzlement proceedings at Verity Savings Bank. Contact State Marshal, 4th District, Kansas. Sheriff Greer got this 2 days ago, Cole said. He came to me before he did anything official. A pause. He won't hold that position for long if someone else makes the connection. She folded the paper. Her hands were steady. She didn't know how, but they were. Greer said something else, Cole continued. He said the inquiry came from the bank directly. Not the marshal. The bank, Victor Marsh. She said, you think he's looking for you. I think he's making sure I stay gone. She set the paper on the workbench. If I stay gone, he stays safe. If anyone finds me and I start talking, the story he built falls apart. Cole leaned against the stall door, arms crossed, thinking, what do you want to do? He said. She looked at him. What do you mean? What do I want to do? You need to decide how far you want this to touch your life before you. I asked what you want to do. His voice was patient. Final. Not what I'll tolerate. What do you want? She didn't have an answer. Not immediately. Because no one had ever asked her that, not about this. Not about the thing that had been chasing her for 3 years. Everyone else, every landlord, every employer, every well-meaning person who'd half-heard a story and offered half a solution, had told her what to do or what would happen or what she should be afraid of. Nobody had asked what she wanted. I wanted to stop, she said. Her voice came out rougher than she meant it to. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to stop waiting for someone to recognize me. She stopped. What? I want Victor Marsh to not be able to do to someone else what he did to me. Cole was quiet. That last part, he said. That's not just about you. No, he looked at the valley through the barn door. A long look. The kind he gave to problems that required real thought rather than quick answers. I'm going to write to a man in Denver, he said finally. What man? A good one. His name was Desmond Rook. Cole had heard of him 3 years back, through a cattle buyer, who'd had a business dispute that needed quiet investigation. Rook worked out of Denver, 45 years old, formerly with the Pinkerton Agency before he'd decided he preferred working alone. He was not warm, he was not reassuring. He was precise and thorough and had never taken a case he couldn't finish. Cole wrote the letter that same evening. He didn't show it to Clara before he sent it. He wrote it himself, sealed it himself, handed it to the Harlan's Crossing Post, writer himself the following morning before Clara was awake. Not because he was hiding something. Because he wanted facts before he made promises. Because that was how Cole Dunbar operated with everything that mattered. He got a response 14 days later. 1 page. Brief. A list of questions and a retainer amount. He sent the answers and the money, and said nothing to Clara. Week 8, the nightmares started. Clara had always had them, in some form. The low-grade kind that left a residue. The ones where she was back in Caldwell Flats, packing a bag, the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her room. These were different. These were specific. Victor Marsh's office. She could smell it, the leather chairs, the wood polish, the particular expensive staleness of a room full of things that cost money. The wide mahogany desk, the window behind him showing a street she could name. In the dream, she was sitting across from him, and he was showing her the documents, her clerk code on every transaction, her handwriting, or something close enough to fool a man who'd never seen her write. Months of work. Careful, patient, systematic. You're very talented, Marsh said in the dream. His voice was pleasant. It had always been pleasant. I've been telling people that for years. She tried to speak. Her voice didn't work. She tried to stand up. Her legs didn't work. The only question, Marsh continued, arranging the documents into a neat stack, is whether you'd like to tell them yourself, or let me. She woke at 2 in the morning, sitting straight up, breathing like she'd been running the room at Dunbar Ridge. The window, showing the valley, moonlight on the grass. She sat there for a long time. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Then another. Then Cole's door opened. "You all right?" His voice, low through the wall of darkness between the two rooms. Bad dream. Footsteps. He appeared in the doorway, a large shadow in the dim light from the window. He wasn't dressed for company. Shirt sleeves, suspenders loose, hair disordered in a way she'd never seen it. He looked less composed than usual, which was the wrong time to find that humanizing. "About Kansas?" he asked. "About Marsh." She pulled her knees up. "He had this office. I can still see every detail of it. Every time I close my eyes, it's right there." Cole came in. He didn't ask permission. He didn't make a production of it. He went to the chair by the window, the small one that was comically insufficient for his frame, and sat down. The chair protested audibly. "Sorry about the chair," Clara said. "The chair will survive," she almost smiled. They sat in the darkness, not talking, not needing to. After a while, 10 minutes, maybe 20, she felt the tightness in her chest begin to ease. Not disappear, just ease. The way a sound doesn't stop, but you stop hearing it as loud. "He's still there," she said. "Into the dark. Marsh. At the bank. Doing the same thing." "You don't know that. I know him." She looked at the window. "He's not the kind of man who stops. He's the kind of man who gets better at it." Cole was quiet. "If there was a way to prove it," she said. "What I witnessed, what he did. If someone could." "Don't, Cole. Don't build toward that yet." His voice was level, not unkind. "Get some sleep first." She lay back down. She heard him settle in the inadequate chair. The moonlight moved slowly across the wall. She fell asleep sometime before dawn. When she woke, the chair was empty. On the nightstand, a cup of coffee still warm. She stared at it for a full minute. Then she picked it up with both hands and held it. Week 12, Desmond Rook's report arrived. Cole got it from the postwriter on a Tuesday afternoon. One thick envelope. He took it to the barn. Read it alone. Then he read it again. Then he sat there for a while with the pages in his hands and looked at nothing. Victor Marsh was still employed at Verity Savings Bank. Not just employed, promoted. 18 months ago, he had become vice president. He sat on the loan committee. He gave speeches at the annual depositor dinner. The local newspaper had run a profile of him last fall. Pillar of the community. Generous with the church fund. Attended every civic event, and he was still stealing. Rook had found the pattern immediately. The same method. Small withdrawals from multiple accounts. Always under the threshold that triggered automatic review. Always attributed to routine maintenance fees or administrative adjustments. Categories vague enough to disappear in a quarterly audit. $32,000 over the past 3 years. Nearly double what they'd accused Clara of taking. And there was a name, Nora Vass, 24 years old, 8 months employed at Verity Savings Bank. Rook had noted, in his characteristically flat prose, that Marsh appeared to be in the process of cultivating a relationship with the junior clerk. The same pattern as before. Private meetings, special attention, the language of mentorship that was actually something else. Cole set the papers down on the barn workbench. He read the name again, Nora Vass. 24 years old. He didn't know her, had no reason to. But he knew the shape of what was happening to her. The same shape as what had happened to Clara. The same patient, methodical dismantling of a person who had no idea it was coming. He thought about Clara at 23. Working $3 a week. Believing she'd been noticed because she was talented. Believing the dinners at her supervisor's house were professional courtesy because why would she think otherwise? He thought about what it cost a person to carry that kind of betrayal for 3 years. He looked at Copper through the stall gate. The old horse. The one everyone said to give up on. Some things take longer than other things. He went inside. He set the report on the kitchen table. He called Clara. She read it standing up. She didn't sit down. She stood at the kitchen table, with her hands flat on the wood, and read every page, and he watched something move through her face that he didn't have a name for. Not one thing, many things. The way weather stacks before a storm, each layer pressing down on the one beneath it. Anger, oldest. Fear, older than that. And underneath it all, something that looked, if he read it right, like a door swinging open. Nora Vass, she said. Very quiet. 24 years old. 8 months in. She looked up. I was 9 months in when it started. He let her sit with that. Rook says if there's a witness to the original fraud. Cole started. I know what he says. Clara. I know. She stepped back from the table, turned away, turned back. Her hands went to her hair, and then to her sides, and then crossed over her chest. I know what this means. If I go back, if I testify, they can cross-examine everything. They can bring up the warrant. They can make me look like a woman with an agenda who… What does Rook say about immunity? He says the prosecutor might offer it. Might. There's no guarantee. She looked at him. There's no guarantee I walk out of that courtroom free. No, so I could go back to Kansas and end up in a cell. You could. And Nora Vass, she said the name again, slower. She's 24 years old. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She sat down. He sat across from her. They looked at the report on the table between them. He'll do it again, Clara said. After Nora. There will be someone after her, and someone after that, because nothing is stopping him. Because I ran. Because I was the only one who knew the pattern, and I took the pattern with me when I left. Cole said nothing. Don't you have something to say? She asked. I'm waiting for you to finish saying it. She looked at him. Finish saying what? What? You've already decided. A long silence. She looked at the report, at Victor Marsh's name, printed in Rook's neat, unfeeling handwriting, at the name Nora Vass. 24 years old, 8 months employed. I need to go back. She said. He didn't respond immediately. The fire shifted. The wind outside pressed against the house. I know, he said finally. This could cost you everything. The ranch. You're standing in the territory. If they arrest me and it comes out that you married a woman with a federal warrant. Stop, Cole. Stop protecting me. His voice was even, not harsh, but absolute. I'm a grown man. I signed my name next to yours at the land office, knowing the situation. I made a choice. Don't take it away from me by pretending you're the only one it belongs to. She stared at him. You think I didn't know what I was doing when I filed those papers? He continued. You think I hired Rook without understanding what he might find? I don't make decisions without thinking them through, Clara. That's not how I operate. Then what are you saying? I'm saying. He put both hands flat on the table. Steady. That we do this the right way. Everything in writing from Rook before we move. Immunity agreement before you set foot in Kansas. A lawyer who represents you. Not the prosecution. You. That cost money. I have money. Not for he looked at her directly. Our problem. Our money. We signed papers that said equal. That goes both directions. She didn't say anything. Because she didn't have words exactly for what was happening in her chest. It wasn't love, or it wasn't only love, or whatever it was building toward that she hadn't named yet. It was something adjacent to it. Something that felt like standing on solid ground after a very long time of testing each step before you took it. I'll write to Rook tonight, Cole said. We send our conditions, we wait for the response, and then we go, and then we go. He held her gaze. She held his outside. The Montana evening was doing what Montana evenings did, turning the sky colors that shouldn't be real and making everything look, briefly, like it might be worth whatever it cost. Cole, yeah, thank you. He picked up his coffee. Stop thanking me, he said. We're partners, remember? And that was that. They wrote to Rook that evening, 3 conditions, written in Cole's precise hand, which she'd come to recognize as the physical expression of how his mind worked. No wasted strokes, nothing decorative, everything exactly where it was supposed to be. 1. A formal immunity agreement, judge approved, before Clara set foot in Kansas. 2. A private attorney, representing Clara's interests alone. 3. Rook's full investigative documentation available to that attorney before any testimony. Cole sealed the envelope. Clara held it for a moment before he took it back. "This is the part where it becomes real," she said. "It's been real, more real then." He looked at the envelope in her hands. "You want to be the one to post it?" She thought about it. "Yes," she said. She handed it back. He'd post it in the morning, before she was awake. Because that was what he did with things that mattered. Acted on them, before the morning's second-guessing could interfere. She knew that about him now. She knew quite a lot about him now. The fire was low. The house was settled and quiet around them, in that particular way of a structure that had been built to last. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "The horse. Copper. The one you bought for $11. She looked at him. "Why didn't you just?" "Because he wasn't done yet. Simple. Immediate. Like it was obvious. He just needed someone patient enough to figure out what he needed." She held that for a moment. "Right," she said. She went upstairs. She lay in the bed that was starting to feel like her bed. In the room that was starting to feel like her room. In the house that was starting to feel like home. And she thought about Nora Vass. 24 years old, 8 months employed, who didn't know yet that the man showing her such particular attention had done this before. Who didn't know yet that someone was coming. Who didn't know yet that she wasn't going to end up alone. The window showed the valley in the dark. The creek moved somewhere out of sight. Clara closed her eyes. She did not dream about Marsh's office. She dreamed about the valley, about the creek running clear in the morning light, about what it felt like to stop running, and for the first time in 3 years she slept until dawn. Rook's response came 9 days later. He agreed to all 3 conditions. The immunity agreement could be arranged through the Kansas District Prosecutor, who, Rook wrote, was eager enough to charge Victor Marsh that he would accept terms. The attorney he recommended was a woman named Harriet Weld, based in Denver, experienced in fraud cases. Not inexpensive. At the bottom of the page, in the same flat, unfeeling prose he used for everything, Rook had added a single additional note: "Be advised. Miss Nora Vass has in the past 3 weeks refused 2 private meeting requests from Mr. Marsh. He has begun, per my observation, to document discrepancies in her account records. I would estimate she has 4 to 6 weeks before formal accusations are filed." Clara read that line 3 times. She set the letter down, looked at Cole. "When do we leave?" she asked. He was already thinking about it. She could see that. The particular stillness of a man doing rapid practical calculation. Travel time, ranch coverage, what needed to be arranged. "I'll talk to Garrett Eames about watching the place," he said. Garrett was their nearest neighbor. 60 years old, reliable as timber. 2 days to get everything arranged. Train east leaves Harlan's Crossing on Thursday. 4 days, is that enough time? He asked. She thought about 3 years, about 7 towns. About a box under a floorboard and $63 and a newspaper clipping she'd carried so long it had gone soft at the edges. "Yes," she said. "Then we go on Thursday." The night before they left, she couldn't sleep. She stood at the bedroom window and watched moonlight move across the valley, the grass silver, the creek a sound in the dark, the mountains beyond, massive and indifferent and permanent. She heard him coming before he reached the door. His footsteps were quiet for a man his size. He'd learned that too, somewhere in the long practice of being careful around things that could break. He came and stood beside her at the window. They looked at the valley together. "I keep thinking about what happens if it doesn't work," she said. "If the immunity falls through. If Rook's evidence isn't enough. If the prosecutor decides I'm more useful as a scapegoat than Marsh is as a target, then we deal with it," he said. "That's not a plan, no. But it's true." He looked at the valley. "Whatever happens, we deal with it." She thought about that. She thought about all the ways things could go wrong. The list was long. She'd been adding to it for 3 years. "Why are you not more afraid?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I am afraid," he said. "I'm afraid every morning when I wake up." And you're still here that something's going to take that away, Unst. He paused. I built this ranch because I needed to build something. I posted that notice because I was tired of building alone. And now, he stopped. Now there's more at stake than 3,000 acres. She looked at him. He looked at the valley. So yes, he said, I'm afraid. But being afraid of losing something is just proof it's worth keeping. The moonlight moved. The creek ran somewhere below. Hans, she reached out and put her hand over his, where it rested on the windowsill. He turned his hand over. They stood there for a long time, not talking, not needing to. Just two people who had both spent a long time alone in the dark, standing together in it, waiting for Thursday. The train east left Harlan's Crossing at 9 in the morning. Cold platform. Steam. The smell of coal smoke and iron and distance. Garrett Eames was there to see them off. 60 years old, weathered like good fence post, the kind of man who showed up when he said he would and didn't make a ceremony of it. He shook Cole's hand, looked at Clara with the direct, uncomplicated respect of a man who judged people by what they did rather than what people said about them. Ranch will be here when you get back, he said. Not if. When Clara noted that, she noted it and held on to it the way you hold on to small things when the large things are uncertain. They boarded, found seats. The train lurched and groaned and began its long argument with the distance. Montana fell away through the window, the valley, the pines, the mountains going flat, and then disappearing entirely as the land opened into the long brown roll of Eastern Territory. Clara watched it all go and felt something complicated in her chest. Not grief exactly, more like the particular ache of a person leaving something for the first time they're not sure they'll see again, which was different from every other leaving she'd done. Every other time she'd left, she'd been running away. This time she was leaving something behind worth coming back to. That was new. That was entirely new. The first day on them was quiet. They sat side by side, not touching, not needing to fill the silence with sound. Clara read. Cole looked out the window at the passing land with the focused attention he gave to everything. Not restless, just present. She kept thinking about Nora Vass, 24 years old. 8 months employed in her mind. Nora had a face now. She didn't know what the real Nora looked like. But her mind had built one anyway. Young. Hopeful. The way you are when you're new to a job and someone important tells you that you show promise. The way you are, you learn that some kinds of attention are shaped exactly like opportunity and are actually something else, has entirely. Clara had been that person. She remembered what it felt like. The warmth of being noticed. The pride of being told you were talented. The gradual, horrible dawning when you realized the noticing had conditions you hadn't agreed to. She was not going to let Nora Vass sit in that dawning alone. The second night. Sometime after midnight, the train running through dark Kansas plain, Clara woke to find Cole still awake beside her. You should sleep, she said. I know. Why aren't you? He looked at the dark window, thinking. About what? A pause. About whether. I've done enough, he said it quietly. Not looking at her. I hired Rook. I sent the conditions. I got you the lawyer. But when you walk into that room tomorrow, I can't go with you. And that. He stopped. I don't like that. You'll be right outside. That's not the same. No, she said. But it's enough. He looked at her then, and she meant it. She genuinely meant it. I have been alone in bad rooms before, she said. Many times. This is the first time there will be someone on the other side of the door. She held his gaze. That changes everything, Cole. You understand that. He didn't say anything, but something in his face settled, didn't relax exactly. More like, landed, like a thing that had been suspended finally finding its ground. They sat in the dark train running through the dark land, and eventually, both of them slept. Caldwell Flats looked exactly the same. That was the first thing Clara noticed stepping off the train onto the platform. Same storefronts, same wide main street, same smell of cattle and commerce and the particular ambition of a town that thought itself important. 3 years. And everything exactly where she'd left it, except she was different. She was Mrs. Clara Dunbar now. She stood very straight on that platform. Because if she was going to walk back into the town that had swallowed her whole and spat out a warrant with her name on it, she was going to stand straight doing it. Cole stepped off behind her. His size alone changed the geometry of the platform. People moved without being asked. Desmond Rook was waiting near the station door. Not warm, not unfriendly, just present. 45. Dark coat, the eyes of a man who had spent 2 decades watching people lie, and had developed a comprehensive boredom with it. Mrs. Dunbar. A nod. Mr. Dunbar, you have the immunity agreement, Cole said. Not a question. Rook produced the papers from his coat. Cole took them, handed them to Clara. She read every line, slowly, because Harriet Weld had told her in a letter. Read every line, always, no matter what anyone tells you about time pressure. Especially in rooms with prosecutors, the language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Clara M. Dunbar, formerly Clara M. Haynes. Full immunity from prosecution related to any testimony given in the matter of Verity Savings Bank fraud proceedings. Signed by the district judge. Witnessed real. Actually real. The prosecutor is Daniel Pruitt, Rook said. 38. Ambitious. He wants Marsh more than he wants you. That's your leverage. Don't forget it. And Harriet Weld? Clara asked. Waiting at the hotel. She'll prep you this afternoon. Deposition starts at 9 tomorrow morning. Clara folded the immunity agreement. Put it in her coat pocket. All right, she said. Harriet Weld was not what Clara had expected. She'd imagined someone severe. Armor-plated in the way that women who operated in men's spaces sometimes became. All the softness hammered out, every edge sharpened to a point. Instead, she found a woman in her mid-40s who wore her gray hair simply and had the kind of steady, unhurried competence that didn't need to perform itself. She shook Clara's hand first. Then Cole's. The immunity agreement is solid, she said, sitting across from them in the hotel meeting room. As long as you testify truthfully. Not selectively, truthfully, completely. If you leave something out and they find it later, it compromises everything. I know. I need you to understand the cross-examination will be aggressive, Harriet continued. Marsh's attorney is a man named Aldous Crane. He's good. He's going to focus on the fact that you ran. He'll make it sound like guilt. What do I do with that? You answer honestly. Harriet looked at her steadily. Because the truth is, you ran because you had no resources, no allies, and every institutional advantage was on his side. That's not guilt. That's survival. And a jury of people who understand what it means to be powerless understands survival. Clara held that. There's one more thing, Harriet said. She looked at her notes. Edmund Grover has been located. The former director. Yes, he's in Denver. He's been contacted. Harriet set the papers down. He wants to testify. Clara went still. She was thinking about Grover. About a man she'd gone to 3 years ago. Shit. Desperate, certain that if she could just reach someone with authority, someone who could see past Marsh's documentation, someone who would listen, who had listened, and sent her away anyway. He knew, she said. Her voice was flat. He suspected. He didn't have proof. And Marsh was connected to the board in ways that he knew, Clara said again. Not angry, just clear. And he chose the easy thing. Harriet didn't argue with that. Yes, she said, he did. And now he's choosing the harder thing. 3 years late, she looked at Clara. Whether that's enough, that's for you to decide. But his testimony about the original investigation being compromised could be significant. The room was quiet. Outside, Caldwell Flats went about its evening business, completely indifferent, the way places always were, to the things that had happened in them. Fine, Clara said. Let him testify. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in the hotel room and stared at the ceiling, and told herself she was not afraid. She was afraid. Stop it. You've been through worse. You've been through... No, she hadn't actually. This was the worst. This was the room and the building. And then with had been the starting point of 3 years. Of everything bad. Coming back to the starting point was not brave. Coming back to the starting point was insane. But Nora Vass. Right. Nora Vass. 24 years old, 8 months employed, currently sitting in a job that was about to turn into the thing that had happened to Clara, and she didn't know it yet, and the only person who could stop it was, stop. Answer the questions honestly. Come home, come home. That was new too. Having a home to come home to, a knock on the door. She was already moving toward it before he finished knocking. 3 months ago, she would have lain there and waited. Told herself she was fine. Told herself she didn't need anyone on the other side of a door. She opened it. Can't sleep, she said. No, he looked at her. You were going to open it before I knocked, weren't you? Already moving, maybe? Good. He came in, looked at the chair by the window, looked at the floor space beside the bed, pulled the chair over anyway and sat down. Different room. Same problem. Some things didn't change regardless of the state you were in. Tell me something, she said. Something that has nothing to do with tomorrow. He thought about it. Copper ran the south pasture last week. He said, by himself, full stretch. Just ran. She looked at him. That's the first time in 2 years he's done that, Cole said. Garrett sent word. She held that image for a moment. That old horse. Everyone's reject. Running the south pasture by himself because he finally felt like he could. Her eyes went wet, which was embarrassing, which she refused to comment on. Okay, she said. Yeah, he said. She got back into bed. He stayed in the chair, and somewhere between midnight and morning, between the fear and the resolution, Clara Haynes, Clara Dunbar, closed her eyes and found the thing she needed. Not courage exactly, certainty. She was certain she was doing the right thing, and certainty, she'd learned, was a different kind of fuel than courage. Courage could run out, could be used up, could fail at the worst moment. Certainty just sat there, quiet and immovable, like a man in a too small chair who had no intention of leaving. She'd told him the night before, you can't come in with me, he'd said. I know, she'd said, you have to stay out here. For however long it takes, he'd said, I'll be here, 2 words. No qualification. No, I'll try. Or, of course, or any of the things people say when they mean something softer than what they're promising. Just, I'll be here. She carried that in with her like a second immunity agreement. The deposition room smelled like old decisions, plaster walls, a long table, a court reporter at the far end with a stenograph, and the professional blankness of someone who had heard everything and found none of it surprising. Harriet Weld to Clara's left, Daniel Pruitt across the table with his files and his ambitious, tired eyes, and Aldous Crane, Marsh's attorney, 50, silver-haired, with the unhurried confidence of a man who had won more arguments than he'd lost and intended to keep his record. And Victor Marsh at the far end of the table. She had not looked at him yet. She looked at him now. He was older, 3 years of it visible in the lines at the corners of his eyes. But the suit was still expensive. The posture was still easy. The expression was still the particular brand of amused patience that said, I am not worried. I have never been worried. I would like you to know that he looked at her the way he'd always looked at her. Like she was a small thing in a large room that he had decided not to concern himself with. Well, he said, conversational, pleasant. Clara Haynes. I wondered when you'd turn up, Dunbar, she said, a pause. Something shifted in his face. Very small. The first small shift, I beg your pardon? My name is Clara Dunbar. I married. She looked at him directly. I stopped running. He recovered immediately. Smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Marsh, Pruitt said flatly. You'll have your opportunity. Please be quiet. Pruitt started at the beginning. Her employment at Verity Savings Bank. Her role, her responsibilities. The access her clerk position provided to various account records. Clara answered each question clearly, completely. When Pruitt reached the section on Marsh's behavior, the private meetings, the locked office, the proposition she'd refused, she said it without softening it, without euphemism, without the instinct she'd spent 3 years fighting that told her to make herself smaller, easier to manage, less likely to make men uncomfortable. She'd spent 3 years making herself smaller. Not today. Crane objected twice. Pruitt overruled him both times. Marsh sat at the other end of the table and said nothing. His face was composed, carefully composed. The kind of careful that told her he was working very hard at appearing relaxed. Good. Then Crane began his cross-examination. Mrs. Dunbar. He gave the name a fractional emphasis that was technically neutral. You've testified that Mr. Marsh created false accounts and attributed transactions to your clerk code. You have no documentation to support this claim. The documentation was destroyed by Mr. Marsh. Yes, conveniently. I wouldn't describe anything about this situation as convenient, she said, a flicker. In the court reporter's expression. Gone instantly. You ran, Crane said, when the investigation began. You left your employment, left your residence, left the state. Is that correct? Yes, and you're asking this proceeding to believe that an innocent person ran. I'm asking this proceeding to consider what options were available to a woman with no savings, no family, no legal representation, and an investigation that had been constructed specifically to make her look guilty. She kept her voice even. I ran because staying meant prison. Not because I was guilty. Because the system designed to protect innocent people was being operated by the man who'd made me look guilty. Crane looked at her for a moment. You're very articulate for someone who… Mr. Crane, Harriet said quietly. Finish that sentence carefully. He didn't finish it. The questioning continued for 2 hours. She didn't break. She answered honestly. Every question, including the ones designed to trip her, including the ones that implied things, including the one asked near the end, with studied casualness, about whether she had agreed to testify in exchange for immunity, as if the immunity itself were evidence of something. I agreed to testify in exchange for protection from being prosecuted for something I didn't do, she said. Yes, I would do it again. Crane sat back, looked at his papers. No further questions, he said. Edmund Grover testified that afternoon, 68 years old, retired. He walked into the room with the particular posture of a man carrying something heavy and knowing it. He sat down. He looked at Clara once. She looked back. He testified that the 1879 investigation into Verity Savings Bank fraud had been conducted under significant pressure from the board, that he had noted irregularities in the evidence presented against Clara Haynes that had given him pause, that he had been advised by a board member he named directly that a quiet resolution was preferable to a prolonged investigation. Did you believe Miss Haynes was guilty? Pruitt asked. Grover looked at his hands. I believe the documentation presented against her was comprehensive, he said carefully. That's not what I asked. A pause. A long one. No, he said. I did not believe she was guilty. But you closed the investigation anyway. I closed it. He looked up. Not at Pruitt, at Clara. I closed it, and I have not had a peaceful night since. The room was quiet. Clara held his gaze. She could have looked away. She had every right to. She let him see her face, all of it, what 3 years had cost, what it had taken, what it had made of her, for better and for worse. She let him see it, because he needed to, because that was the only true payment available. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just witnessing. He looked, and then he looked down, and the testimony continued. Victor Marsh took the stand on the 3rd day, smooth, prepared. He denied everything with the practiced ease of a man who had been denying things his whole life and found it effortless. The false accounts were bookkeeping errors, later corrected. Clara's accusations were the grievances of a disgruntled employee. The transactions attributed to her clerk code were accurate. He was composed, consistent, and Clara sat beside Harriet and watched him and thought, he's good. He really is good. He knows exactly how much eye contact is appropriate, and exactly when to pause for sympathy, and exactly how to let his voice go slightly pained when he described being accused by someone he'd tried to help. She felt something cold and clear in her chest. It wasn't hate, it was recognition. She recognized exactly what he was doing because she had been the subject of it. And she knew, in the way you know things that are true, before anyone proves them, That he had done this before, not just to her, that there had been someone before her. And Nora would have been someone after. Would have been Nora Vass arrived. On the fourth day, nobody expected her. She appeared in the doorway of the proceeding room, with a leather satchel over her arm, and the expression of someone who had made an irreversible decision and was still processing the weight of it. Crane objected immediately. She had not been subpoenaed. She had not been on any witness list. She has the right to present herself as a voluntary witness, Harriet said calmly. The court can determine relevance. The judge looked at Nora, 24 years old, brown hair. Steady hands, though Clara could see the effort it was taking. You have information relevant to these proceedings? The judge asked. Yes, sir, Nora said. I have documentation. She opened the satchel, inside pages, handwritten, dated. Notes recording specific conversations, specific instructions, specific directions she'd been given for account maintenance procedures that, when she'd later checked them against bank policy, didn't exist. Dates going back 6 months. Because Nora Vass had been scared, and when she was scared, she wrote things down, not because she knew she'd need them, because she'd needed somewhere to put them. She'd read about Clara in the newspaper, had recognized the name of the bank, had sat at her desk in Caldwell Flats and read the first 3 paragraphs and felt her hands go cold. Then she'd gotten on a train. The room was very quiet as she spoke. Crane objected 7 times. The judge overruled 5 of them. Then Pruitt asked about a specific transaction, an account number, a date, an amount. Crane leaned forward, put his hand on Marsh's arm. A warning. Marsh moved his arm away. That was the moment. Right there. The moment a man who had spent 20 years being the smartest person in every room decided he was still the smartest person in this one. Men like Marsh. Rook had once written in one of his flat, unfeeling reports, don't lose because they're caught. They lose because they can't stop explaining. They need you to understand how they did it, even when understanding them destroys them. And Victor Marsh, in attempting to explain why this particular account had been coded the way it had, provided a detail about a routing procedure that hadn't been in any of the bank's public documents, that hadn't been in any of the documents Rook had submitted, a detail that only the person who had created the transaction structure would know. Crane put his pen down, slowly, and looked at his client. Marsh looked back, and in that look, that silent exchange between a lawyer and his client in a small room in Caldwell Flats, Kansas, everything that had been built over 3 years of careful, patient, systematic destruction quietly finished falling. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Clara spent both of them in a state of suspended animation that she later had no clear memory of. She ate because Cole put food in front of her. She slept because the exhaustion eventually outweighed the anxiety. She walked through the hotel corridors and sat in the lobby and watched Caldwell Flats go about its ordinary, indifferent business. Cole stayed close, not hovering, not asking, just there, within reach, the way a wall is there when you need something solid to stand near. He's there. Things have not entirely collapsed. Continue. On the afternoon of the second day, Harriet came to find them. Jury's coming back, she said. The courtroom was full. Clara walked in and didn't look at the crowd. She sat down. She put her hands in her lap and held them still. Cole was in the gallery behind her. She could feel the specific weight of his presence, solid, unchanged. The jury filed in, 12 faces, all carefully neutral in the way of people who had agreed on something and were waiting for the formal permission to say so. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. The foreman stood, a man of 50, weathered, the kind of face that had spent years outdoors deciding things. We have, Your Honor, on the first count, embezzlement in the first degree. How do you find? Guilty. The room exhaled, not loudly, a collective, barely audible release of held breath. On the second count, guilty. Third count, guilty count after count. 21 counts total, guilty on 19. Victor Marsh sat very still as each verdict was read. Not the stillness of a man who had prepared for this. The stillness of a man who was discovering for the first time that the thing he'd believed, that he was untouchable, that everything he'd built to protect himself was solid, that he had covered every angle, was not true, had never been true, had just required the right person to come back and say so. When the last count was read, Crane immediately began his motion for appeal. The judge denied it. Set sentencing for 3 weeks. Clara sat very still and waited for something to happen in her chest. What happened was nothing dramatic. No flood of relief. No tears. No collapse. Just quiet. The particular quiet of a storm that has moved on. Not the absence of everything that had happened. Not erasure. Just the sound of it finally stopping. She stood. Harriet touched her arm. It's done. I know. Pruitt appeared at her elbow. Mrs. Dunbar, thank you. This case will set a precedent for. What happens to Nora Vass? Clara asked. Pruitt blinked. I beg your pardon? Nora Vass. Her employment. She came forward voluntarily. She testified without any protection arranged in advance. What happens to her job? Pruitt looked slightly caught out. The bank will likely ensure she keeps it, Harriet said. Not a request. That will be part of the settlement terms. Pruitt looked at Harriet. Harriet looked back, of course, he said. Outside the courthouse. The afternoon light was the ordinary flat light of a Kansas afternoon with nothing particular to recommend it. But it was outside, and she was walking through it free. Cole was waiting on the steps. He saw her come through the door. She saw him see her. And then she walked to him and he opened his arms, and she walked into them and stood there for a moment, with her face against his chest, and her eyes closed, and just breathed. The street continued around them, completely indifferent, which was fine. They didn't need it to care. It's done, she said. I heard. He's guilty on 19 counts. I heard that too. She stepped back, looked up at him. Can we go home? She asked. He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she'd been trying to name for weeks. She had a name for it now, settled. Like a man who had been waiting for something for a long time, and had finally confirmed it arrived. Yeah, he said. Let's go home. Rook found them at the hotel that evening, with a final accounting, his fees. The court's witness compensation for Clara's testimony. A check that made her stare at it for a long moment. The bank's insurance settlement will include a provision for the original misappropriation as well, Rook said. Grover pushed for it. Before he left, Clara said he owed you the attempt. Rook put on his hat. Whether you consider the debt settled, that's your business. He left without ceremony. Which was appropriate. That was how Desmond Rook operated. Clara looked at the check, looked at Cole, put it toward the ranch. She said, It's your money. The ranch is mine too. She set the check on the table. We talked about the adjacent parcel. Garrett mentioned the Holt land might come available in the spring. Cole looked at the check, looked at her. 800 acres, he said. Close to 4,000 total. He sat back. A long, quiet moment. Outside, Caldwell Flats was settling into its evening, lamplights coming on. The sound of a town that had been here before, all this and would be hereafter. All right, he said. They left the next morning. The train west. Clara watched Kansas fall away through the window and felt the opposite of what she'd felt leaving Montana. Not the ache of leaving something worth returning to. The lightness of leaving something that no longer had any claim on her. 3 years. 7 towns. A newspaper clipping in a wooden box. She'd been carrying all of it like a second self. The other Clara, the one who ran, the one who waited, the one who checked the locks twice and slept light, and never unpacked all the way. Because you never knew when you'd need to move again. That woman had done her job. She'd kept Clara alive. She'd kept her moving, until moving brought her to a notice on a board that said respect in plain handwriting and on good paper. She could let her rest now. Cole was reading beside her. She leaned against his arm. He turned a page. Neither of them said anything, because nothing needed saying. Harlan's Crossing looked the same and different. Same storefronts, same wide street, same sky. But this time she got off the train. and it felt like arriving somewhere. Not like passing through. Garrett was at the station with the wagon. He looked at their faces and seemed to read what he needed to. "All settled?" he asked. "All settled," Cole said. Garrett nodded. "Loaded their bags without ceremony. Copper got into the grain store Tuesday. Don't know how. Boy's got a talent for finding trouble." Clara laughed. Actually laughed. The real kind. Cole looked at her with that expression. Settled Ada Colton came to the ranch 2 weeks later. Clara saw her coming up the drive and had approximately 4 seconds to decide how to be. She decided to just be. Ada dismounted without elegance, stood at the fence gate with the posture of a woman, doing something difficult and not particularly enjoying it. "Mrs. Dunbar," she said. "Mrs. Colton." A pause. A long one. "I read about the trial in the paper," Ada said. "The Telegraph had the full account, did they?" "They did." Ada looked at a spot slightly to the left of Clara's face. "It appears I was operating on incomplete information when I made certain statements. In public." Clara waited. "I was wrong about you," Ada said. "I said things I shouldn't have said, to people who shouldn't have heard them. And she stopped. "I wanted to say that directly. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't particularly warm. But it was real." Clara could hear the realness of it. The friction of a woman who did not apologize easily, choosing to do it anyway, because it was right. "Thank you, Mrs. Colton," Clara said. "I mean that." Ada looked at her directly. For a moment. "You've got more grace than I would have. I've had 3 years of practice at deciding which things are worth carrying," Clara said. "This isn't one of them." Ada left without staying for coffee. But she'd come. And she'd said the words. Sometimes that was enough. Spring. The Holt parcel came available in April, 2 weeks earlier than Garrett had predicted. They bought it. 860 acres of prime grazing land that brought the Dunbar Ridge total to just over 3,900 acres. Cole spent the first week walking every inch of the new boundary. Clara went with him on the 3rd day. "You don't have to," he said. "I know." They walked the new fence line together. He pointed out the water access, the sheltered draw that would work for winter grazing, the stand of timber on the northeast corner that would need selective harvest in the fall. She listened, asked questions, made notes in the small leather book she'd started carrying. Building, actually building, not surviving, not waiting, not managing the next departure. Building it felt so different from everything else she'd ever done that she kept stopping to notice it. Like a person who's been cold so long, that warmth feels strange and specific and worth paying attention to. "You went quiet," Cole said, thinking, "What about?" "About how this is the first time I've ever planted a garden that I intended to actually harvest." He looked at her. "The vegetable plot," she continued, "back at the main house. I put in twice as many seedlings this year as last year, because last year I still wasn't sure I'd be here to see them come up." He stopped walking. "And now?" he said. She looked at the new land, the new boundary, the creek running through the draw that would give them water through any dry season. "Now I know I'll be here," she said. He reached over, took her hand. They stood at the edge of the new boundary, with the whole ranch behind them, and the sky doing what the Montana sky did. Making everything look, briefly, like a painting of the best version of itself. "We should get back," she said. "I need to check the seedlings." "Yeah," he said, but neither of them moved immediately. Because some moments were worth standing in a little longer than necessary. Years passed. The way they do when you stop counting them against something else. When you stop measuring time by departures and start measuring it by harvests and winters survived, and children born, and the slow, satisfying accumulation of life built on ground that held. Their first child came in the autumn of the following year, a boy. They named him James, not after anyone famous. After the particular quality of a certain kind of morning in early fall, when the light came through the valley flat and gold, and everything seemed, briefly, uncomplicated. 2 years later, a girl, Margaret, who arrived with a full set of opinions about everything, and never reconsidered any of them, which was. Cole observed dryly, Familiar, the ranch grew. The garden grew, Clara's bread, still made before dawn, still the best in the territory, became something people came from other towns to buy, and then from other counties. And then she stopped selling it commercially because she didn't need to, and she preferred to give it to people she chose rather than whoever could pay. She gave a lot of it to Nora Vass, who moved to Montana the year after the trial and settled in Harlan's Crossing, and became, in time, one of the people Clara trusted most in the world. Nora never talked much about Caldwell Flats. Neither did Clara. Some things you set down and don't pick back up. Cole turned 42 the same year turned 8. They marked it quietly. Family dinner. Garrett and his grown son, Nora. A few people from town who had, over time, turned from observers into neighbors. After dinner, Cole and Clara sat on the porch, the valley below, the stars above. The particular silence of a place so far from other noise that you could hear your own breathing. "You all right?" Clara asked. "Fine, you're quiet. I'm always quiet. You're quiet in a different way." He looked at the valley for a long moment. "I was thinking about the notice," he said. She looked at him. "I sat at that table for 2 hours before I wrote it," he said. "Wrote it 3 times. Threw the first 2 away because they sounded." He paused. "Desperate, were you?" "Yes," he said it without apology. "I was 32 years old, and I'd built everything worth building. And I had no one to sit on a porch with." He looked at her. "I put that notice up, and I told myself if no one answered, that was the answer. That some people just lived alone. That it wasn't a failing, Cole. And then you came up that driveway," he said. "On a borrowed horse, looking like you'd been making hard decisions your whole life and had made one more." He shook his head slightly. "I didn't know what to do with you. You made coffee," she said. "It was all I had." She looked at the valley. "It was enough," she said. He put his arm around her. She leaned in. The stars did what stars did. Burned quietly, completely indifferent to the human arrangements occurring below them, and somehow made everything look more significant because of it. "I was afraid," she said after a while. "When I rode up that driveway, I had an entire conversation with myself about turning back." "What made you keep going?" She thought about it. "The horse," she said. "The way you fixed George Ferris's horse, at the hitching post, with nobody watching." He looked at her. "That's what did it," he said. "A person who is careful when nobody's watching." She paused. "That's the only kind worth trusting." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, "Huh, what? Nothing." But the corner of his mouth moved. "Just thinking I'm glad I didn't know that at the time. Would have been too much pressure." She laughed. He pulled her closer. "Copper died that winter, peacefully, in the stall Cole had built for him, on clean hay, with nobody making a fuss about it. Cole found him in the morning, stood there for a while, didn't say anything. Later, Clara asked if he was all right. He had good years, Cole said. More than anyone thought he would." She understood he wasn't only talking about the horse. The notice, framed, hung in the hallway of the Dunbar Ridge Ranch house for 60 years, not in a place of honor, not centered, not lit, not displayed like a trophy, just on the wall by the kitchen door, where you'd pass every morning going in and every evening going out, where it became background. Familiar. Part of the texture of the house. Visitors sometimes stop to read it. "Man of property seeks wife, must be strong, honest, willing to work, no weakness for drink, no fondness for gossip, no fragile temperament, but it will be fair. Offered in return, security, respect, and equal share in all holdings. Serious inquiries only." They'd look at it, and look at the house, and look at whoever happened to be there and ask, and did someone actually answer this? And the answer was always yes. One person. First inquiry and only inquiry. A woman who had ridden 4 hours on a borrowed horse because she was tired of running, toddling, and had seen a man fix a stranger's horse with nobody watching and had decided that was enough to go on. And she'd been right. That was the whole story. And it was, in every way that counted, enough.